Hello, people, and welcome back to another episode of the USL show. Much to my excitement and much to your demise, I am back from my long vacation. Go ahead, turn your podcast player off now. Look, it was a fun time away, but not as fun as watching every single team in existence get a red card over this last weekend and completely derail any match that you were possibly excited for. Oh, and Tulsa is partnered with the PGA now? Question mark. I don't know. Um, John, how you doing, man?
Doing well. Yep. Thanks on coming back here to join us and save the podcast from having me host once again, because that's just a nightmare.
It is
But yeah,
fine.
yeah, thank you very much. But yeah, congrats on everything that you've had going on the past couple weeks. Big time in your life. So happy to have you.
Yeah, for people who don't know, I got married. This small thing of that matter, which was fun. I don't remember like any of it. I'm sure it was a wonderful time. My wife tells me so. I'm joking, of course. It was a blast. Ryan, wearing a Spurs shirt with a new manager on the horizon. Surely this one's different, right?
Yeah, surely hope so. But happy to have you back, Kaylor. It was do at least want to add that we were able to get the previous pods in under an hour.
Without me.
During your absence in
Without me.
a tight 58 minutes. But we're happy to have you back. It was like the bat signal had shown into the sky, and then it's like we need you back on the pod.
Yeah, there's only one person that can stretch this thing to an hour 20 without fail. Man, look, a whole lot happening, y'all. And I didn't tell Ryan or John about this beforehand, that I was going to do a quick monologue, but this is the first episode that we've had. That's not Kit season, which check that out, of course. Of since Pride Month, right? And us at the USL show are all in on Pride Month, and we don't want to share any news, but like check out Alan's Twitter, Alan Underwood. Check his Twitter out, and there's a lot of other people around the USL family that Pride speaks real volumes to, whether it's their own personal life, their own family, or they're just a good sets of humans, right? So happy Pride Month to all. And I do want to say, for the USL clubs out there who have ignored Pride Month, screw you, straight up. You can put out graphics about everything about your your half price beer and your, half season tickets that are going out. You can put that out on June 1st, June 2nd, June 3rd. It's June 6th, and you have made your stance clear. It is very obvious at this point. And we were working behind the scenes because, you have a social media manager for a reason, right? So the people working behind the scenes doesn't have to do that. And if you say our sponsors could not do this, our sponsors didn't want to do that, they would be very angry with us. Is that really the kind of money you want to have in your club? And that's just a reflection of yourself. And I hope you really take a good look in the mirror with that. So I just wanted to get that one off my chest because that one's one that's sitting a little close to my heart right now. So anybody want to speak on such, or we will move on?
No, agree with everything you said. Definitely check out what Alan has said this month. It's brave of him to come out and have statements like that. It's brave and proper for clubs to have statements in favor of Pride Month and basic human rights and decency. So, it should be the standard.
Yep. All righty. Well, moving on from that segment, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the U.S. Open Cup. First, we are going to go straight into this week's USL Tactics, which for Pittsburgh fans, you may not want to hear anything about Pittsburgh footy right now, but hey, don't worry, your team's still really good. And let's find out why.
Today, I want to talk about the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, who have been red hot on the back of a 5-1-3-1 shape that in the press is so effective at denying the forward lines of the opposition, never allowing pockets into the midfield because of an aggressive press of that front three midfield group, and because of the hard closing that you get from the wing backs and the center backs at that second level. You're going to see a couple of examples here. Note right up the bat, that hard press from Matola Shuonmi from that striker spot. Phoenix tries to play over, but they don't have control. And then Pittsburgh, because they did not allow lanes, because they denied that pass and won the ball back, are able to play over Phoenix, exactly taking advantage of what they're doing. Phoenix here is out on the break, but look how immediately Ordonez steps up from that right side to deny Manuel Arteaga, the opposing striker. You see how Pittsburgh is able to get into their patterns, and that same shape now is pushing the wingbacks up in attack, creating opportunities because of how they are building out tactically. You're seeing two forwards there as well. That number 10 player who I labeled as a CM in the initial graphics is able to step up as more of a striker in attack. In the Columbus game, these same sorts of principles held true. Pittsburgh is going to close hard in the middle, use their central defenders as these auxiliary players who could support the high press. But when push came to shove, Pittsburgh was going to sit in that 5-1-3-1, defend with their lives, and completely deny the middle of the park. They have been so disciplined, so good at using players who signed as rookies, who signed without much USL experience, and they've leveraged them to create an elite defensive side. You saw it again once more with that Dikwa winner in the Open. They create the turnover with center back pressure. Mertz finds Dikwa, and it's game over. Pittsburgh is succeeding in the league, in the Open, and across the board because of this Bob Lilly found shape in the 5-1-3-1.
And look, I know for Pittsburgh fans, obviously the loss to Cincinnati tonight sucks. The first goal, not what you wanted to see. You could probably argue in circles on whether it was on or off. If only there was a system that was in place at TQL Stadium that they could possibly call upon that they could have used. Only if. Anything for I'm not even whatever. I'm just gonna anything for Sleepy Dawn to get everything to push through, right? Am I right? Come on, folks. Political statements on a soccer show. Everybody loves those. But I mean, look, that this Pittsburgh team is still legit. And you kind of saw at the end of the game, Pittsburgh does get their goal back. But this is a different Pittsburgh team with Dikwa in the lineup. But you can say that about anybody that would have Dikwa in the lineup because he's really good at soccer, right? But that back line, how good they all are. And, there was a lot of talk before the season of like, yeah, they're really good defenders, but they were really good defenders 5 years ago. Where are they now? Well, sometimes I think we overthink Lily Ball because, Lily Ball do go burr sometimes. And he just puts it out there and it works every time. And it's incredible to watch.
Yeah, I mean, the way that not only do they have a talented group, but I mean, it's very youthful, very inexperienced, a lot of new faces this season that Lily has inserted into this team and transformed into one of the most cohesive units you can imagine at this level. I obviously talked a lot about the shape in that tactic show breakdown. The way that they can balance out being very aggressive and closing down and trying to create these little overloads in the press but still are able to maintain balance and keep numbers at back is admirable for sure. I think in terms of just thinking about the Open Cup game and what went wrong, Cincinnati was able to build pretty patiently. They used their wide center backs in that back three very effectively. When Pittsburgh overcommitted, Cincinnati had the talent to take advantage in a way that you don't often see at the USL level. And I think that's the challenge of facing a good MLS team in the Open Cup, and especially one that's running with basically a first choice lineup. So it is what it is. I mean, given the Dikwa injury, playing Danny Griffin at striker for so much of this game, the not called crazy offside thing that would not happen in Ron DeSantis's America. Yeah, it's pretty tough there for Pittsburgh, but hold your head high for a really great run in the Open Cup and know that you're in great shape in the league right now.
I mean, this is a Pittsburgh team that's exiting the Cup to the side who I think is going to personally win the Open Cup this year. It's a very good FC Cincinnati team, the former villains of USL turned villains in MLS. it's like no shame to kind of exit the competition to this really good Cincinnati team. And like even looking back in their own league form, they haven't allowed a goal in the last 184 minutes. They've had 4 shutouts on the year. And it's just still that don't doubt Bob Lilly and everything that he does, that he will find a way. I recall even being skeptical this year from the offseason on how Pittsburgh would kind of form. And it just kind of shows that with a process in place, Bob Lilly knows what he's doing.
In the end, I mean, we always say that defense wins championships. And, especially since they won it all that year, we always look back and say, look at that Orange County team. Look at that Orange County team. All you need is a defense and a striker. What does Pittsburgh have, right? And they have a good midfield to go along with that. I don't want to undersell this Pittsburgh team. I mean, Danny Griffin is a freak of nature. And, you say playing him at striker is a bad thing. I mean, he's also, if you let him play there long enough, I think he could be one of the better strikers in the USL too. He has that in his locker. What they're able to do year after year, I mean, in the end, he builds off the defense, and you eventually just pray that a striker breaks out, or you have somebody that can bag a goal even every other game because your team's going to be in it because your backline's so good. I mean, this Pittsburgh team's legit. And if you're Pittsburgh, not only because USL rivals and what it is like with Birmingham versus Pittsburgh going on right now, but if Birmingham loses against Inter Miami, which is bringing a full starting 11, they are bringing their best 11 by the way it looks. Pittsburgh will get that sweet $25,000 off the basis of the tiebreaker. Pittsburgh has beaten more MLS teams. So, I mean, that is $25,000, which for some people who are used to seeing the mega deals happening in Saudi right now of $200 million, you're like, that's nothing. But 25 grand can legit save a soccer club in the U.S. So
I'm just disappointed Phil Neville won't be making an appearance in Birmingham.
His son will.
I mean, like you'd even mentioned with Orange County last year with being a defense team. I mean, look back at that Rochester Rhinos 2015 team that only allowed 15 goals in the regular season and had 19 shutouts on the year, which was simply unreal for a defensive side in USL. But then you look at some of their just starting 11, like you have the likes of Valesky and Steven Dos Santos standing out as those really good strikers that they had in this team. That's kind of how Lilly has built this Pittsburgh side.
Year in, year out. I mean, it's truly a process. And, every single year we get to the U.S. Open Cup, and there's always that conversation of Bob Lilly is the best one that best coach you've never heard of. He's the best coach you never heard of. Look, MLS fans, this is the best coach you never heard of. If you're not a Pittsburgh fan, you kind of hate Bob Lilly because it's like, how do you do this? You're like, every coach has a system. Why are you so good at it? There's a reason that Pony just swears by Bob Lilly, just kind of blindly believes Bob Lilly good, because he has proven to only be good. It's ridiculous what he does year in, year out. And I should be standing in awe and shouting from the rooftops, but I kind of hate the guy too. Not even real reasons. I'm just tired of losing to his team.
Well, I mean,
it's not Miami boss.
Yeah. It's not a pretty style of soccer that he plays. It's very much a pragmatic kind of game that if you're on the other side of it, if you're a neutral who's trying to just enjoy a Riverhounds game, it can kind of be a grating experience. But I mean, it's been effective for years and years and years for a reason. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Well, moving on, unless somebody else has anything to gush over this Pittsburgh team with, which I'm sure we will later anyway. Let's talk about some of the bigger news that's happened in the USL, and it officially came out today with Tulsa. And no, I'm not talking about the PGA Tour. It is that Tulsa guts more of the team, sends away fan favorite after fan favorite after fan favorite, and they send over Levis, and then they send over
Dario Suarez.
Dario Suarez. I was about to say DaCosta, but that was Miami. There's been a lot of trades this year. For Tommy McCabe and cash considerations.
My favorite player.
A top player really at his game. There's a lot of places to go with this one. I've talked kind of broadly about how I don't understand this move for Tulsa. And there's a lot. You can look at the tactics of it and say that Tommy McCabe can really shore up the midfield, which has been a big issue this year. Dario hasn't been the player that he has been in the past, and you can say all that. I thought Levis has been actually pretty good this year. You can say what you want about him. I think he's a great talent that I would personally want to keep around. But more so than that, Tulsa has lost every single player that they've really ever loved. Like Bourgeois and Corrales are the only two that are really still sticking around. I mean, I wrote it down earlier. I mean, you're looking at losing Dario, Da Costa, Marlon a couple years ago, and then Rivas to the Miami last year. That's tough if you're a fan, seeing all of your fan favorites leave, even after the tough times. Forget the tactics. There's emotions in this too.
At the same time, I think it does beget the question, what has Tulsa done that would warrant keeping together this core other than kind of sort of be on the playoff bubble for years and years? It's no doubt it's really tough when you're getting rid of these players who have been like the identity of FC Tulsa. I'm heading in from that Roughnecks rebrand into this new identity. Suarez and Da Costa especially have been stars, but I am sort of on board with the idea that this team needs a refresh in a pretty big way. When they brought in Blair Gavin, when they had a lot of that roster overhaul this offseason, I think it was on the cards that they were going to keep moving if things didn't immediately click. And I give them credit in that regard. With the specifics of this deal, sure, getting rid of Suarez is one thing, and I'm a little bit more sympathetic to that just because they've got Epps, they've got Dyer, Goodrum obviously just came in. There's depth in the attacking group that I'm not worried about that. But Levis was somebody that you hype up as one of the best defenders in the CPL. Sure, he's taking up an international spot, but I mean, that's worthwhile given the injuries they've had in defense as well. And yes, they just got Adam Armour on loan from MLS. He can fill in. Corrales is capable as a left back still. But Levis is the quality of player that you just don't want to give up like that. And this is not anything against Tommy McCabe, but that's a lot to give up for Tommy McCabe, who is probably like the replacement level number 6 in the USL for my taste. I don't know.
I blindly agree with that. I mean, I think he could. I thought he was a good player for Detroit. I said before that I thought Detroit, there were times that Trevor James was getting a little bit too stuck in a system, a slave to a system where he was just blindly playing in the wings because that's what he does. And I thought McCabe would have been a really good defensive midfielder to plop in and say that everything's going to run through the spine, everything through the spine, and just get away to do something else. And I thought McCabe could have been a really good player to do that.
And just on the Detroit bit real quick, they've basically been playing Reese Williams at left wing back or Connor Rutz out there for much of the season. Getting Levis in that spot is massive for them.
Huge.
They can't score a goal. Suarez is somebody who is good for 9-10 goals every season just as a matter of being on the pitch. So this is a really good move if you're Detroit.
To me though, and this is something that you brought up, and yeah, I know Ryan, you have something you want to say real quick, but I'm just going to finish this thought real fast. It almost feels like Tulsa emptied 2 international slots because maybe there's something else in the cards.
It feels like it.
Yeah, I mean, I get the sentimentality of like these are players that have basically been around the team for so long and have been stalwarts and just so many recognizable faces. But this is a Tulsa team who started this season worse than they began last year, and we basically, I mean, when their first 12 games of last season saw them lose 8 times, and they still had 4 wins in that time. This season, they only have 2 wins, one of them being Goodrum Magic against Louisville, and then they have a win over a Loudoun United team, which has kind of fallen off the cards recently. It almost seems like they needed to do something at least drastic enough to kind of maintain this playoff position. I find it interesting they're trading with a team that they're going to be competing with for that kind of final playoff spot, but it's a chance for them to kind of at least kind of start the new era. I mean, they have Loudoun again in Orange County as their next 2 games, and then they have basically a homecoming with Detroit City at the end of the month.
But how much can you really say that, they're competing against Detroit? This still straight up tells me unless they bring in someone insane with these international slots they freed up, that they're giving up on this year, right?
I would disagree in that regard because, again, like, they did just bring in Armour at left back to fill in that spot. Rucci, Corrales are comfortable there. By bringing it, they don't have a proper number 6 on the roster right now, other than like Christopher Pearson and Nathan Worth, who are both. I mean, Worth is 16 years old. It's preposterous that he'd hold down those minutes. With getting rid of DaCosta and bringing in Goodrum, you needed Blaine Ferry to move up and play as the number 10. You had Eric Bird go down with injury. So McCabe has needed depth in the midfield, and I think he balances things out decently for them. But I think there was a better way to use the resources and turn Levis and Suarez into something a bit more useful. And again, like, I feel like I'm being really mean to Tommy McCabe on this. He's a good player, but it's just a lot to give up for him.
And I understand that, but when you're also, like Ryan mentioned, you are going against a person that you're fighting for position 8.
Yeah.
Like that, let's be very brutally honest. I mean, granted, Detroit's look good recently, right? They look
2
like
wins in a
things
row.
are. I mean, they look like they're putting stuff together, right? But to that same point, like, they're going to be fighting for position 8. That's just the truth. And Detroit, as of now, because we don't know what's on the cards for Tulsa, what are they doing? Because, John, you kind of briefly mentioned that, this team in 2024 is going to look good for Tulsa, right? Goodrum would have to re-sign. A lot of these players would have to re-sign because they only have what's left on their contract anyway. So how can you plan for next year when much of your team's going to be gone for next year anyway? And everybody said this year that Tulsa was going to be in the middle of the great rebuild, essentially, because they let a lot of team go last year too. It feels like they've been constantly just trying to do this, a clear roster when things aren't working, and say, well, later on this year when we bring in blank player, or next year when we have this brand new slate to work with. I mean, they just rebranded. How many clean slates do they need?
I think it's a process, though. I think this is the continuation of what you saw with the Rivas trade at the end of last season, when you bring in Sam Dorr to run this thing, bring in Blair Gavin, who they committed to, 2/3 of the way through last year. So step 1, get the leadership in. Step 2, start to move out the roster. And they've got a very competitive team that I think has played better than the results have been so far. This is still a good starting 11, even if they've had some injuries and they're moving some of the fan favorites. I would not be shocked to see them end up as like the 7 seed in the East when things start to click a little bit more right now. And hey, part of that is these are giant playoff fields this season.
Yeah.
But you got to give Tulsa credit for having a vision, and it is a salient point that a lot of these guys may not be back next year. But you're also seeing more continuity league wide, roster wide, as teams are committing to players and not just going for those 1-year stints. So I like to take the positive spin and think that Tulsa is doing this all with a vision in mind, but I definitely take what you're saying in good faith here.
All right. Anything else on Detroit and Tulsa? No. I'm just going to speak broadly. Red cards happened. If you were excited about a match, a red card happened. The matches that didn't have a red card were actually pretty boring games. So maybe the USL was getting sick of boring games, and we're like, throw in some red cards. Because Indy gets not Indy, Charleston. Good gosh, got a red card that is it a red? I'm not a ref. I don't know. But Indy gets a 4-0 win that, maybe they would have won that game anyway. But it's hard to know when, you go down a man in 19 seconds in, the second fastest, only to Ryan's own Wilmington Hammerheads. Thank you, Nicholas Murray. I mean, we get red cards galore out of Miami, Memphis Miami game. I mean, we get San Antonio, San Diego, which I just want to immediately quickly jump into this one because there's a lot to break down here, but also not a lot to break down here. Because Mitchell Tainer, good. That I'm just going to just blindly throw that one out there. He's kind of good at soccer. And then there's a red card for a second yellow because those are so in right now. And then in the last like 15 minutes, it all falls apart and we get an exciting draw out of San Diego. And yet no one's talking about that because at the end of the game and a really weirdly cinematic post-match interview. Like, I don't know where they found the only like black box in San Diego just to put him in there and film him. He goes out there and says it was very chippy and, oh yeah, our players got spit on during the game. And it was like, wait, what? Where did that come from? I don't know if it happened or not. And then San Antonio fans say, well, your player tried to commit murder. How come that was only a yellow and not a red? And it was one of the most exciting matches we've seen this year, and no one's talking about it because people are talking about spitting and kicking. It's like me watching a preschooler.
I mean, the late goals from San Diego's point of view was that it came back and rescued a draw, and that was something that basically benefited myself, Gio, and Phil because we had picked draw in that game, and the rest of the crew had picked a winner out of that one. So that was certainly a very point-changing result for our predictions. But, I mean, we'll get these two teams to have a rematch on June 14th, pretty much in a week and a half time, so it'll surely have a lot of the emotions and feelings still kind of boiling over there.
Just talk about those first 20 minutes for San Antonio. That's as good as they've looked at any point during the title run, dare I say. Yeah. I thought the pressure in the midfield was fantastic. The way that they are finally getting goals consistently from Oluwaseyi, who has been a revelation on loan. Of course, he was the guy who got that second yellow that changed the game. We can talk about how good or bad that was as a call. But again, credit to the Loyal, who have really become the comeback kings this season. Like, they're kind of playing bad soccer right now on the sly. I know they lost to RGV. They lost to somebody else. They had to come back against Miami, and they had this comeback. But when you can throw on Damas and Collier and Conway into attack, move into like a 2-3-5 kind of thing offensively, that's really fantastic for them to have this capability to adjust on the fly. And credit to Nate Miller for constantly making the right changes in games. I think he's been a little bit weak with some of his initial setups, honestly, and some of the squad selection, but the guy knows how to make a tweak to get results. So kudos to him.
Yeah.
I mean, 8 of their 13 games this year have seen over 2.5 goals scored combined.
I mean, it was the thing that we always said about San Diego last year was that there was going to be goals scored. You're going to have a good time watching a San Diego game. If you were a neutral, for me, I would just throw on a San Diego game because it was going to look good. It was going to look bad. Goals were going to be scored. Goals were going to be allowed. It was going to get feisty out of nowhere. That was just San Diego. And, it's kind of continued on this year, just being comeback kids. I mean, you mentioned that Miami game. It takes an amazing own goal and, some real late game heroics to get back into that game and rescue a draw. This is a team that just kind of gets results. And, we can talk about that with Sacramento, and we talk about the rise of Sacramento and being how good they are. I guess for me personally, I'm almost more impressed with the team that's scrappy and can get draws than I am just the team that just outright beats everyone. And that's not really fair because the team that beats everyone's just better, obviously. But I just have a love for teams that are just kind of scrappy, even if San Diego does not look good in the meantime, but it's fun.
And I checked the stat. It's if you basically the points that they've earned from games that they had to come back from behind to rescue a result, they're 6 points better off now than they were had they lost or those games in the end. That would drop them basically down to 8th in the table in the West.
Yeah, with the San Antonio side, obviously red card changes the game a lot, right? But I mean, they get a little bit of your a little bit of your Monterey Bay conversion rate where 3 shots on goal, 3 goals. You know, you do kind of have to be playing a perfect game in that kind of situation. And, they did it well and then it all kind of fell apart. But that's something that's been kind of interesting out of San Antonio this year that I've noticed is that they take their shots. They're not afraid to take shots. But the thing is, it feels like every shot that's on target goes in. And it almost feels stupid. This is a ridiculous thing to say, but sometimes it feels like just put a shot on goal. It's going to go in because you're that good. It's like stop trying to place it into a top corner. Just shoot it on target. It's going to go in because they just seem to do that. If I'm San Antonio, obviously you're mad about the Nate Miller comments, and obviously you're mad that you didn't get a win after being 3-0 up, and say whatever you want. But also, if I'm San Antonio, I'm just like, we're really good when we have 11 people on the pitch.
Yeah, they're 8th in the league for conversion rate this season, so sustainably finishing. I do think it speaks to the fact that they're just really good at creating good chances, like the way that they get out on the counter, constantly put themselves in positions on set pieces. They're just effective at finding that route to getting in dangerous spots. So kudos to them. It's why they're such a dangerous team year in and year out.
Yeah.
And honestly, these next 6 games for San Antonio are going to be basically ones that will define the season. I mean, you have El Paso this week, then the rematch with San Diego, Sacramento, Birmingham, Memphis, and then El Paso again. That gets you to the middle of July. Hey, those are basically games that will kind of determine how are we going to view this San Antonio team? Because I think we all will see them as a playoff side, no doubt, probably guaranteed to have a home playoff game in the first round. But are they going to be able to keep pace with Sacramento, or are they going to be comfortably a 2 or a 3 seed in the West?
I mean, if you're San Antonio, do you care? I mean, your whole brain is mentality monsters. You want to go into the Indomitables den and get a result. I think they almost want that more. Like, I don't think they would ever sit there and come out to the public and say, we want to be away during the Western Conference Finals. But I think a little bit of them are just like, yeah, we want that.
For what it's worth, last season when they did play Sacramento in the regular season, they won that game at home and then lost that game when they had to travel to Sacramento.
Because everybody loses in Sacramento. It's incredible what kind of home record they have. But moving on to a team that doesn't have a great home record despite their wonderful attendance. And you already brought up one of the other teams in El Paso. El Paso versus New Mexico. I mean, this is one of the better derbies that you'll find in the USL. It's a great time. Our own Phil was on, with Seriously Loco. Not Phil was there, but the Seriously Loco crowd was there, which is a blast. They had a wonderful time, 1-0. And just like everything else, you want to talk about what happened on the pitch, but immediately after the game, Zach Prince is gone by mutual agreement, is what it says, so this is not a sacking of any kind. And I don't know if it's officially been announced where he's going yet. It has. Okay.
It's not I don't think it's official, but it's an open secret.
Gotcha. Well, go look for it if you haven't. We don't want to, unless John, you want to break news. But like,
I won't be. I'll be coy in that if you know where Troy Lassen is and the fact that they're homies, you can read between the lines there. But
yeah, this was a match that, hey, El Paso sneaky good this year, and this comes down to, I think, what I said in the middle of the season, that El Paso did this thing where they just simplified everything. They came out in the 4-4-2 and they just kind of do the dang thing. Forget about these fancy systems where it looks pretty. Just be simple. Just keep it simple, stupid, right? And that's kind of what they've been doing. But if you're New Mexico, I've been critical of Zach Prince personally because it feels like every time he puts a winner out there, he changes it. And it's become a thing where if I see them win, I'm automatically going to pick them to lose the next week because they just don't seem to put it together. And it's frustrating. It's really frustrating. But also, where do you go from here?
New Mexico has, I know we were just talking earlier about Tulsa and the continuity or lack thereof recently. New Mexico is very much a team that keeps it within the family, the way that they run things. Lassen was the manager from year one. Prince was promoted to that job as one of his former assistants. They just named their first sporting director ever, who was someone who was in the front office a couple years ago. They like to support this internal New Mexico community when, in all honesty, this team is screaming out for a refresh. They've had players who have been there since year one, are real stalwarts of the team. If you think about Suggs and Bruce and Yearwood and Chris Wien and all of those sorts of players. And I think that they'll have their qualities. Once upon a time, they were part of a team that looked like they could be a threat in the playoffs. But I think the league is moving past them to a certain degree. And you mentioned being critical of Prince. I'm right there with you. I think that his deployment of fullbacks in very narrow, very unexpansive positions constantly hurts this team in attack. I think he hasn't been able to find a balance with Amando Moreno and Santi Moar up top or on the wings. There are problems that can be solved within this roster right now, and Prince just wasn't the man to do it. It's time that they kind of look outside of the internal system and go for a little bit of a bigger swing, if you ask me. But I don't see that on the cards for them. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong innately with the approach. Like New Mexico is always in the mix for a playoff spot, but showing a little bit more ambition, really rewarding those excellent crowds at the lab would be a great step for them and for the league, I say.
So as Ryan gets integrated back into the call, welcome back. I I don't want to be too harsh. I feel like I'm always so mean to goalkeepers, and I feel so bad about it. I really do. But at what point do you let Ford Parker get a run? Because Tim Bacchus has looked okay at his best this year. He distributes fine. He shot stops fine. But you have a guy who's waiting in the wings in Ford Parker who not only is a very talented backup, he's also from Albuquerque. He's literally a hometown kid. At right now, what you're needing is, like you said, they want to keep it in the family, right? They want to get guys that are local. They are one of the best teams in the USL at being a city first club, right? At what point do you give a little faith and give back to the community by letting a community player play, right? At the worst come to worst is that he has a blow up start, it doesn't work, he concedes 5 and you put Tim Bacchus back in. I mean, where they are right now, I feel like they need something to click, and right now that's the most obvious place to look for me. But because there's so many other places that you can look at, maybe the keepers just have more of a spotlight on them that isn't really fair.
I mean, they only have one shutout on the year, and that was the opening match they had against Miami to start the season. And I mean, they've been shut out twice in all of their matches this season. So, I mean, to their credit, they're scoring goals. They're just not converting it into results, and they currently find themselves outside of the playoffs at the moment with Tampa Bay this week.
And this is a team, to be fair, that's had a lot of injury troubles with Nava right at the beginning of the season. It took a while to get Chris Wien back. They've done a good job of integrating some of those younger kids. If you think about Robles and Wagner, I don't think Tim Bacchus has really been the issue. He's sitting about like 33rd percentile, most of the goalkeeping metrics. So below average, but within the realm of decent USL goalie. But hey, if Ford Parker can be the guy to galvanize the team, something's got to give here. Like, I'm naturally defensive of Tim Bacchus as somebody who's just been in the league for a while, but that's the same argument you could make about 90% of this lineup. Like, you can't keep relying on this group that has never taken New Mexico to like a home field playoff game to real sustained excellence. So I'm in favor of doing something to breathe life into the team right now.
I mean, I'd even argue that they're still feeling the effects of that second half of the season hangover they had last year. I mean, at some point we got to the second half of the season with New Mexico and just felt, okay, they're on cruise control. They'll coast their way into the playoffs and take a first round exit, which they did. And it's just, it seems like they can't rest on their laurels at this point, that they're still kind of the same complacent club, and it's coming back to bite them in the ass, and that they need to basically do something to change the team. And maybe that requires a change in manager that we have already. And I'll be interested to see who they can kind of bring in and see if they can at least galvanize some support.
I'm just going to say this before we move on real fast. And I'm sorry that El Paso isn't getting a lot of love here. It's just, I mean, El Paso good. I mean, sometimes it is that easy. They're just.
Let me shout out Eric McHugh real quick, who has been unreal stepping in for Yuma in that back line. Like when Yuma goes down, he's the heart and soul of that defense. He's been there forever. He's such a vocal leader. And McHugh is somebody who had some time in RGV, looked okay, maybe getting an MLS shot. He has not missed a step, and the solidity he provides stepping in is gigantic. What Brian Clairot is doing with that club is unreal at this point. So let you get back to it, but there's the good word on El Paso.
Yeah, I mean, El Paso is just so good. I mean, Clairot, I mean, he brought simplicity, and sometimes I think for some managers that feels like you're kind of roasting them, right? Because I mean, Sam Dyche, I mean, everybody says, oh, he plays the 4-4-2. You know what to expect from big Sam Dyche, right? Or Sean Dyche, sorry. Ryan put Big Sam in our chat. Now I got confused. Sean Dyche, right? That's not a bad thing. It got him a lot of success. And sometimes last year we'd see Hutchinson. Oh, that was weird. Hutchinson would just do weird things that didn't fit the players he had whatsoever. He was kind of playing FIFA at times where he was like, I know this system works, but did not take into account that he didn't have players that could do it. I was very critical on, I mean, Evan Newton, right? I was screaming from the first match that he was completely ruining Evan Newton, to the point that Evan Newton was getting booed at home for no reason when he was just being put in an awful situation, right?
Oh, Gaylor out.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to at least add on that El Paso, if they can get a win over San Antonio in this next game, they'll have surpassed the longest win streak of last season, which was held by the Tampa Bay Rowdies, also at 7 games. And if you go back to the 2021 season, then that longest win streak was at 9 games, also held by Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and just to circle back on that Evan Newton point, and I think it is interesting the tendency of fans, of people just to scapegoat one player or one person from, I think for Newton, I think it was a mistake in one of the first handful of games of the season where El Paso just kept having these crazy kind of hilarious errors and Newton became the fall guy for it. It's worthwhile to kind of take a longer perspective, let things develop, because this is a locomotive team that this season lost their first 3 games. They got it together after that point. They really started rolling. I mean, it's impressive what they've done if you just give them a little bit of patience. And hey, it's paying off handsomely for them in the table right now.
I mean, this was an El Paso team who lost their first 4 games last season, and they barely missed the postseason. So the fact that they have this turnaround, I mean, if you look at all the teams who were winless in their first 3 games of the season, the only one that ended up in the postseason last year was Oakland.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. And it also speaks to the fact that the Roots are kind of incredible at making those late runs to get into the playoffs. But
Kaylor says power went out.
Classic. Well, let's go ahead and transition over to that Forward Madison Central Valley game. It was pretty much a chalk weekend in League One across the board. Other than this, that saw Fuego finally get a win and over a good Madison team that we tend to think is pretty decent. And hey, Fuego are out of the basement at this point. They've got 10 points out of 10 games. They're only 4 points off of that last playoff spot with the game in hand on Tormenta. So looking decent there. Did you have any thoughts on this matchup in particular?
This was certainly a match that Fuego just needed. They needed some result to point to and say, hey, this can work. We can actually turn this around and kind of like improve things moving forward. I mean, they still are tied with the worst goal differential in League One right now, but 2 wins of their last 5 at least can help kind of string together momentum. And they did so against a Forward Madison team, which we were all pretty high on, saying that they're one of the best defensive teams in League One right now.
Yeah, I mean, the calling card for them, at least when I think about this Madison team, is Kaler always ringing the bell of they've got the best back line in League One and maybe all of USL, period. And yes, they're co-leaders for least goals allowed. They've looked good at times, but man, they're just not figuring it out on a consistent enough basis. I like a lot of the talent that they've got in there. They brought in 2 former USL Championship guys in Mauro Shikero and Isidro Martinez, who have looked good, and Christian Cheney, who they got from Central Valley over the offseason, has really been effective. But in this one, I think Fuego showed their strong suit on the counter in particular. I think Alexis Cerritos was fantastic yet again. He's really a player that we should be paying attention to. He just does so much in this Fuego team. He was the one who scored that or converted the late penalty to give them the win. But ultimately, Fuego is a team that we disrespect, and for good reason, but there's something here that's going to keep them competitive down the stretch. And I don't think they're going to be a playoff team when push comes to shove, but they're not going to be a pushover at the same time. Yeah, and Kayla, back in here with some... Oh, go ahead.
I was saying, like, the fear becomes is that they've dropped 6 games already for defeats to start the year, and that it's going to basically be really hard to dig themselves out of that hole come playoff time, because like we looked at Omaha from last season as a team who kept themselves in the playoff picture due to how many points they were able to put on the board early, even if it was through a draw. And the fear is that you're dropping so many points right now from Fuego that it becomes really difficult to kind of get out of that slump to start. I mean, we saw it with FC Tucson last season, that they had so many defeats to start the year that it kind of ended before it could get started.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about that Fuego team, I mean, you're looking at that left side. I like Partida, Falk, and I mean, obviously Bijev doing Bijev things, going over that left-hand side. That's where a lot of their chances came from in this game throughout it all. In the end, Forward Madison just, yeah, like you kind of mentioned, they just never seem to really put it together, despite me being very high on them. It seems like sometimes they, like I was kind of saying with El Paso, like they overcomplicate it at times. Like it sometimes, like, hey, just bomb it up your wings and cross it into Cheney, right? I hate to be that simplistic and say it's that easy, because soccer is not that easy, right? But I do think it is kind of that easy in this case, especially when you already had the lead, right? You don't need to be getting caught out like you are, right? That's just kind of something they just kind of kept getting caught out. They want to get the second. They want to get the second. It's not pretty. The same thing we talked about Bob Lilly at the top of the show, right? It's not pretty, but 1-0 wins are 3 points. I mean, San Antonio just got a 7-0 win over Charleston. Guess what? That counts for 3 points, just like an ugly 1-0 win. If you're Forward Madison, get your goal and rely on your back line, because it's so freaking good. Stop getting caught out and making silly mistakes. And my point that I was going to make on the El Paso thing before I got cut off by my power going out, it was a long-winded way for me to eventually get to the fact that every time I look at Greg Hurst, he does not look like what I thought he would. Every single time I see Greg Hurst, he's not the person I think he is. I don't know why that happens. I don't know. That was where I was getting to.
That really was, yeah. The point is taking too long to get there when God decides to cut out your power.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that should teach me the old, like, 20 words or less. That will get me somewhere, but I don't know. Grandpa didn't raise me to speak with few words. I don't know many words, so I just repeat the ones I know a lot.
Electric.
Hey, I got bullied into not using that one, okay? That cyberbullying works, apparently.
So you mean electric wasn't in your wedding vows?
No, did not do wedding vows. I was roasted pretty hard because I was talking very quietly during the reception or during the wedding, because like we were reciting the vows, and the pastor was like, hey, you only have to say it loud enough for her to hear you. And I'm like, cool, I don't want to get up here to do a public speech. And then the first thing that happens, they come up like people come up to me like, well, we couldn't hear a word you said. I heard everything she said. We couldn't hear anything you said. Did you even say your vows? And I'm like, yes, leave me alone, please. Like, God, I was so mad. Let's go ahead and move on to predictions because, like we said, hey, there's no one who can drag this thing out to an hour-long 20 show like I can, so we probably should get on the road. Let's go ahead and start off with this U.S. Open Cup match between Inter Miami versus Birmingham Legion FC. For people who are wondering, the stadium is for what they can allot right now, it's looking close to being a sellout. So, which I think is close to 20,000 people of what's allotted. So it looks like it's going to be a big turnout for the Three Sparks. I already kind of know what I think of what's going to happen in this match, but I would like to hear from the outside points of view first.
I mean, I went with Birmingham just because, you know, the meme of Rob Lowe standing there with the NFL hat. It's that, like me with that, but a USO logo instead. So I picked Birmingham. I'm not overly confident, in all honesty. My MLS complete lack of knowledge is showing for sure. What I do know is that Inter Miami is kind of a dumpster fire right now in terms of getting rid of the coach and everything. So maybe that leans Legion, but yeah, blind faith.
I mean, I think this is Birmingham Legion's basically biggest home match they've had since 14 days ago. But yeah, I picked Legion to win this one as well. Just more of they're going to carry the banner for USL, and that Inter Miami just isn't in the right space right now to really kind of put together a sizable cup run. And, you know, Birmingham will be up for this game. And this just seems like the proper match that they could take advantage of.
My very biased opinion, for people who don't know and can't tell by the way I talk, I am a Birmingham fan. So I am very biased when I have this assessment, right? But Birmingham is a team that is built to counterattack. Whenever they have 50% or more of the ball, they struggle. When they have 49% or less, they are unbeatable. That's just kind of who Birmingham are. And when Inter Miami is best, they are a counterattacking team as well. Some of their best games came whenever they only had like 35% of the ball. But I hate to be so simplistic in egos get in the way. If your coach or if you're one of the players, your dad just gets fired, the last thing you want to do is concede over 60% of the ball to a USL team. Right? You're going to sit there and say, we are the higher division team. We have to dominate the ball. If we don't, what do we do? Right? There's a lot of ego there. So if Inter Miami tries to flex the talent muscle, which they will because they're bringing a good team, I think that if they hold on to possession, Legion have a really good chance of taking advantage of this team because while there's a lot of names on that back line, I mean, DeAndre Yedlin's still a dude, and Callender is being called up to the U.S. men's national team, pretty good. In the end, they still concede, like, I think the third most shots in MLS. They have conceded the fifth most goals in MLS. Their defense is still a turnstile, and if Tyler Pasher, Prosper Kasim, Enzo Martinez catch them on the break, it's hard to beat that. I'm going to blindly say that Legion, I think it's 50-50. It's truly a 50-50 game. It's whoever maybe has like the final chance at it kind of game. I'm going to blindly say Legion because I'm a homer.
And you locked them.
I locked it because I'm trying to feel something. I want to feel. Also, first ever WFC match that day, and I'm very excited about that. Could not be more stoked.
Love it.
So, let's see. What else do we have for some predictions? I'm going to pull them up real fast. I want to go ahead and talk about this Louisville versus Memphis 901 match. 901 have looked very good. They finally are kind of looking like the team we all sort of thought they should be if Pearman was still the coach, right? And I don't mean to be super disrespectful to Glass here, but this is the team we thought they would be under Pearman. They're finally starting to do that. Going against Lou City, who are, I'm going to steal John's words, they're kind of broken right now. And yes, they're still sitting high in the standings. Yes, they haven't had their first choice back line, but at what point can you call it a first choice back line if none of them are ever playing together anyway? And we can talk about plug and place all day with Lou City, but they're not in form, and by God, Memphis is.
Well, I'm going to push back on the backline thing. I think we're 2-3 weeks in a row now of the same group starting there. Let's be real, the Josh Winder era is over. Like, he's gone next month. I mean, Wes Sharpie is in that spot, and he's been starting there because of it. And the defense isn't the problem, I think, is my thing. The offense is really struggling to create anything right now. And yes, in the draw against Hartford over the weekend, Brian Ownby went off really, really early in that game, which obviously you lose your star on the wing, things are going to get problematic, and that played out that way. But this is a trend for a Louisville team that is, I think, 20th in expected goals per match right now. They've got a negative goal difference on the season. They just don't look like a coherent soccer team, even though they are sitting fourth in the table. Meanwhile, Memphis, who it was their first game without Philip Goodrum, they sort of moved into this like much more fluid front four kind of shape, and they looked no worse for the wear. They were scoring for fun, admittedly against a Miami team that was down a man. So that's a long-winded way of saying I think Memphis is showing a lot of versatility in what they're doing, and they're much hotter. I've got them winning this one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different Louisville team from what we're kind of used to. I mean, only twice this year have they scored or multiple goals in a match, and that was their 3-1 win over Miami, and then the 3-1 win over Orange County, I believe. And it's not the same Louisville team we're used to seeing at on offense. When you compare it to their first 12 games from last season, they had 21 goals scored by then, and they were still looking really good by the time they got to that point. They have been at least scoreless minutes, 181 in a row going into this one. I took Louisville for this one to try and just kind of differentiate from this, just from the consensus picks. But yeah, Memphis is in really good form, and it would not surprise me to see them win.
I mean, unfortunately for Louisville, they go against Joe Rice last week. I mean, he didn't face a shot. I can't say that's anything. But I'm going to fly that banner as high as possible until inevitably it all comes crashing down. But until then, my castle stands strong. And like I said, Memphis is just so good right now. And I wonder how much of this from Louisville is that, and I kind of said it jokingly and oversimplistically on Twitter, but the whole like they got away from what they were really good at, which was a 3-man back line. They've gone to this 4-man back line, and you would think that it would only affect the attack, but frankly, or their defense, but frankly, they look too rigid. And none of it looks fluid. None of it looks pretty. And you can mention Brian Ownby all you want, but it just doesn't look like you would expect a Danny Cruz team to look. For that, I'm going with 901. That one's pretty straightforward for me. I am going next out to San Antonio, where we do have a nice little Copa Tejas going on here. And hey, El Paso sitting at the top of that thing, averaging over 2 points per game. San Antonio, they are the reigning champions, and they want, in more than one way, they want to bring them back down to earth and put themselves back up on those rankings. Can San Antonio get back those 3 goals that they inexplicably lost? I can't say that word. Or does El Paso continue their hot run?
Yeah, I think this is, in a weekend full of really good matchups, this is probably the game that I'm most excited to see play out. San Antonio with 10 men on the field, or rather 11 men on the field, is a weapon, obviously. I'm curious how El Paso comes at this one tactically. Do you try and force San Antonio to possess and kind of break out of their shell? Can you get an early goal that really changes the shape of the game? There's a lot that's fascinating me. I trust San Antonio to come out motivated, try to show that they're still the big dogs here in the context of the Copa Tejas rivalry. So I've got San Antonio, but I'm feeling very confused about this one.
Yeah, I really wrestled with going back and forth on both teams in this one. I mean, you have El Paso, who are unbeaten in their last 8 games, 7 of which are wins, and then you still have a San Antonio team who are quite good, and red card aside, is still one of the better teams of the league. I ended up taking a draw on this one, and just because I think it'll be a really fun and high scoring match, but yeah, I there wasn't enough for either side to convince me that they were going to take all 3 points.
This is where I would definitely pick a draw if I could allow myself to take draws. And I always mention that because it's definitely not a self-inflicted thing that I do to myself constantly. But I'm going El Paso. I for no other real reason other than that's just kind of the vibe I'm getting right now. And the way when I always do that against San Antonio, they always win by like 7 or 8 or whatever they're feeling that day. So everything's telling me that that's the wrong decision, but I'm just going to go with my gut. I'm going El Paso. Moving on, let's go ahead and stay out west and let's talk about San Diego versus Sacramento. I think you could probably say match of the week. It's going to be in San Diego. It's going to be bumping. It's going to be rowdy. These are probably the 2 top teams in the West right now. You can argue, and they're going to be battling it out. San Diego, as we all know, had that 3-goal comeback, and Sacramento they come back against Tampa Bay. And they wrestle a draw out of Al Lang, which is just a nightmare to play in. I mean, another red card there. That's obvious. How does this one end up going for a Battle of Cali? Let's go Ryan. Rest in peace,
Yeah, I
John.
picked Sacramento to win this one. Sacramento only have 2 wins away from home this year. It was the victory they had over Hartford and then the victory they had over El Paso. But I still think, even though they rescued the draw out of Tampa Bay last week, that Sacramento is still a very good team. And they'll not only get the win this weekend, they'll be the first team of the year to cross the 30-point threshold.
Yeah, sorry about the Wi-Fi issue on that. I ended up going draw here. This is going to be a really fascinating game. By all accounts, Sacramento should be in control. I thought that they did a good job in the reverse fixture here very early on in the season, beating the press by letting their center backs go hog wild as ball carriers. I thought the approach in the midfield with Luis Felipe in particular was really wise. So how does Nate Miller respond? What does he do personnel-wise? Do they get Koke Vegas back in goal also? He's been out, and Duran Furry had a really tough go of it against San Antonio. So, man, there's a lot that makes me think, okay, this is going to be the Republic. But I'm trusting the Loyal to come out passionate here, and I think they end up drawing.
I'm going with Sacramento, and I'm just going to I think until they just look bad for more than just one game, I'm going to keep picking Sacramento, which there's not a lot of tactics that I can talk with that one. It's just they're really good. So I'm taking Sacramento. We're going to do one last championship team before we go down to League One. I want to talk real briefly about Charleston versus Detroit. Does Charleston lick the wounds from a 4-0 defeat and say, you know what, we went down, after 19 seconds, we'll figure it out against a Detroit team that doesn't like to score many goals? But if you're Detroit, you're coming off 2 wins against one really good team and one okay team. And you're saying we scored goals, we had clean sheets, and this is a Charleston team that hasn't scored goals for fun like they did at the beginning of the year. This is still a good Detroit defense. No matter what, will they score goals and do more than just to get a draw? What's going to happen here, boys?
Yeah, this is a game that I just want to complain about the fact that it's starting half an hour before the Legion Open Cup game. Like, whoever is scheduling this for the USL, try. But yeah, I just think Charleston is the better team here. I think that they're going to end up getting the win. Ironically, Declan Wynn is going to play a massive deal in this game as someone who moved from Detroit to Charleston over the offseason. I think that the width that he's going to provide is really going to cause a lot of trouble behind those wing backs for Detroit City. I'm expecting that we probably won't see Levis and Suarez in. I would love to see them maybe get some cameos off the bench or start if they're able to. But I just think that Detroit has rode their luck a little bit excessively with some of their conversion rates lately. They're awesome defensively, but they don't have the juice against a very well put together Charleston defense.
Yeah, it's always interesting with how Pierman has his team coached that they've had basically like 3 games this year where it was a defeat, and it was always your question on how do you come back from this one. They lost to Colorado Springs and then came back and beat Las Vegas. They had this 7-0 defeat against San Antonio, then came back and beat Monterey Bay, and they have this 4-0 defeat against Indy 11. It's always about like how are they going to respond, and especially when you take these defeats at home, it hurts the morale. I mean, this is your home venue, this is your stadium that you don't want to disappoint your fans, and I just think it's a tougher task now with Detroit coming into town off the back of 2 wins that it's going to be a draw, but hey, Charleston definitely need a good response in this match.
Maybe a part of me is just trying to be on the good side of Detroit fans. Maybe a part of me is being like Stockholmed into believing what, Trevor James is doing. I don't know, but I'm taking Detroit here. I believe in that back line so much. That defense is just so ridiculously good. And, say what you want about conversion rates. I mean, I understand, but also Maxi good. Right. And like, he makes magic happen. There's a lot of magic that can happen from this team still. I think that at the very worst for Detroit, they walk out with a draw because their defense is just so good that it travels. Dang it. So I'm taking Detroit here. Real quick, we're going to hit some Ligue 1. And we are going to first go to Greenville versus Omaha. Greenville, who could not quite get the Albus off the back. They tried their darndest, and then a mental end to the Tormenta Greenville game, by the way. If you didn't watch it, just go watch the last 15 minutes. It was something else. They're going against a Union Omaha team that, if you didn't watch that game, I've never seen an Omaha team so rattled. They are down bad right now going into their biggest rival in Greenville. Who takes the belt home?
I mean, you have Omaha.
Yeah, Greenville quietly and somewhat poor. Oh,
thanks. Sorry, I think the Wi-Fi lagged.
Yeah, you just finished off talking. My Wi-Fi is dying. Yeah.
No worries. I said we have Omaha, who's winless in the last 5. I'm taking Greenville on this one.
Yeah, I mean, quietly, Greenville not in all that great a form. Crucially, losing Devin Boyce to a red card at the end of that Tormenta game, I think that'll end up playing a big deal here in what would have been a really fun little rivalry comeback matchup for him. I've got a draw just because I think the Triumph are better than the results and are due to get some good luck in here. At the same time, Omaha is a good team. I don't know. I'm struggling to balance this one out, but I do think draw.
I'm going Greenville, and if it wasn't me painfully being a homer and just vibing the Legion, this would have been my lock of the week. I'm all in on Greenville. Omaha is down bad right now. Nuhu is great. I mean, he is fantastic, but Charlotte demolished them 3-0. And it's not that Union Omaha didn't have chances. They had really good chances, actually. I mean, they created a lot, but it just felt like a team that just could not put it together. And it was a hard watch, especially at the end of that game. It's hard for me to see them getting back to it after just kind of reading body language from that one. And that one's a tough one. I'm going to go with Greenville Triumph. Last up, real fast, Ford Madison versus North Carolina FC. Probably your match of the weekend when it comes to League One.
Yeah, going North Carolina here. They got that nice gritty 1-0 win over a good Knoxville team last time out. I make the same point every time that I think their offense is just tremendous. I think that makes the difference for them here.
Yeah, I have North Carolina winning this one as well. 4 wins away from home this season. They've scored in every game they've had when they travel. Forward Madison is the last team to shut out North Carolina, by the way, this season, but I just think NCFC is the better side right now.
I'm going to, again, kind of blindly go Forward Madison. I mean, their back line is just so good. And you kind of mentioned that gritty 1-0 win for North Carolina. I mean, Jaden Cervania is just a freak. He is so good. But I still kind of blindly believe in this Forward Madison team, and I'm going to stick with them, taking Forward Madison. I think that's about it for the USL side of things. Unless anybody has any final thoughts on the USL part of the show.
I've got a stupid one.
Go for it, please.
So we'll paint the picture. It's Sunday afternoon. I'm just doing my idiotic thing on Twitter. I post that thing, which was because the news of the trade had broken. It was Dario Suarez, but with the Wario hat and mustache. It was just Wario Suarez. And then I checked my notifications, and the last thing that had happened before that was Trevor James had followed me on Twitter. So the first thing he sees is Wario Suarez that he's just traded for. I was greatly entertained by that.
One of my favorite things with Trevor James' Twitter is the fact that I went on the USL show account just to find out that we were blocked by Trevor James, which don't know when that happened. Not a clue. But Trevor James, not a fan of the USL show.
Wow. Rude.
I know. I'm a little hurt. I won't lie, but it's okay. I mean, we did find out that or Didier Drogba found out that he owns Phoenix Rising recently. Good for him. That was a moment for him that he gets a Twitter mention and it's like, oh crap, I still own this team.
Do you think Diplo still remembers that he owns it?
No, not a shot.
Just on the other side of that real quick, Loudon is a mess, people. I think 6-7 straight losses. They sold Armanakis off to Phoenix. I am galled by the fact that they started 3 players who are young kids on loan from DC last week. Like, so much for the fully independent thing this year. It's sad to see, honestly.
I mean, if you're looking at Loudon's kind of future games, it's Tulsa, Miami, Birmingham, Tampa Bay, Charleston, and Hartford gets you through to July. Where do you see a win coming in that?
The crowd goes mild. Nowhere.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Before we go,
August 12th, Las Vegas Loudon in Las Vegas.
Please
Vegas
tell me.
Going to kick their teeth in.
Oh, wow. Someone bring the horse. Can we please get the horse down there, and the horse and the llama Pegasus and the llama just face off?
I'm pretty sure they've got this booked for halftime already.
They bring out the wrestling stuff and they go at it.
I feel like Las Vegas just has like an idea box that they just reach their hand in and just like pick out like 2 things, and it's just like, okay, so how can we connect dollar beer night and everyone plays roulette?
I mean, look, I would love to hear their front office call out. And front office is like, "Are you bringing the horse?" And they're like, "No, we're not bringing." It's like, "You're bringing the horse.
You bring the horse now."
Jose Canseco rides out on the Pegasus wearing a half Loudon, half Vegas shirt. He's back to hit more balls into the stands, but this time riding around like a jouster would in like medieval times. I got it for you, Vegas. I'm here all night.
T-shirt cannon. I actually saw a funny thing on Twitter where someone at their wedding, instead of like they spent like some of their wedding budget on each the bride and groom to have a T-shirt cannon to like give out commemorative T-shirts at the wedding. They said it was like the most hyped thing ever.
Yeah, forget the toss in the bouquet. Launch that thing out of a T-shirt cannon.
If they can launch a hot dog 8 rows up in the upper deck at baseball stadiums, they can do that at weddings.
look, nothing gets me more excited at one of those games like like especially a basketball game, especially college basketball games where they always have the male cheerleaders that are way too swole for their own good, and they're all each in competition, and just seeing who could throw it the highest. Always love a good time one of those because every now and then one always unravels and they just get clowned for not being able to throw past the first row because it's made of cotton and they can't throw it that far. Always cracks me up. Hey, look, sorry about Wi-Fi stuff today. We don't have Spectrum, but John and Ryan have Spectrum, and those guys suck. Am I right? So please send us better internet if you don't mind. We have a very important show to run here. That's very serious at all times. Final thoughts for the weekend. Let's go ahead and start off with John.
Yeah, I'm still in mourning from the fact that Padma Lakshmi is leaving Top Chef. She's been the host for 17 seasons. I mean, this is kind of the biggest news in my life right now by a mile. So thoughts and prayers to me, thoughts and prayers to her. Finale this week, which I'm so hyped for because this is really my Super Bowl. Like professional sports leagues I enjoy, it's USL and then Top Chef. So that's my current mood.
Ryan?
Yeah, Across the Spider-Verse was a fantastic film. If you haven't gone out and see it yet, definitely get the chance to go watch it. But yeah, other than that, I'll be back with another No Meaningless Stat episode later this week. I know it's a short little break, time off, but I think this will be a really decent one on the cards this week.
Excited for that. Always check out Kids Season and No Meaningless Statistics, of course. I love the No Meaningless Statistics because I one of these days, I don't want you to actually film a No Meaningless Statistics. I just want to know like what your thought process is to get there. Like, do you also have the Las Vegas idea box that you're just kind of like, here we go.
One of these days, I'll make it a live stream where I'm just trying to find the most random connections possible, and I'll package it as like a behind the scenes look.
Amazing. Catherine and I am rewatching. I just rewatched the first season of The Crown. She is watching it for the first time, and she is currently watching season 2 without me, which I have not seen. So I'm waiting on her to give me the updates on. So, good show. Hans Zimmer kills the score. It's really good. And I mean, that's honestly about it, really. I'm really anxious for tomorrow. I've never been so nervous for a game that I'm not really a part of. All I am doing is watching, and I'm already incredibly nervous, which means it'll only be really great or absolutely devastating, and I won't be able to leave my house for an entire week, which I don't leave in my house anyway, so nothing has changed. But look, thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all so much for following along. So sorry about all the internet stuff. I would love to say we'll get it sorted out, but that's on Spectrum. You call customer support for us, why don't you? Yeah, thank you all so much. And even though he is not here, and check out his Twitter, here's Alan.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show. The USL Show is now proudly part of the Protagonist Podcast family. Please go to protagonistsoccer.com to check out more work. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see everyone again next time.